So what's going on off the back of Donald Trump's guilty verdict? Because if you have paid any attention to what's being said by Republican congresspeople and senators, but also to Fox and Newsmax and One America and all of these far-right and Christian nationalist news channels that are lining up behind him, they're now sowing distrust in the U.S. judicial system. And analysts are warning that a backlash could soon start to tear at the social fabric in this already volatile election year.
People realize we are no longer safe anymore, and it's because of the progressive left agenda of making sure that we don't keep people in jail. And, they're out there with 33 arrests, but, they're still assaulting people or violently attacking people down the street here. And I'll throw in a hooker and a guy who's a serial perjurer. This is lunacy. And I think that any red-blooded American who sees this is going to understand this isn't what we do to our political enemies. This is what they do in kangaroo courts and third world countries. God help America after what I've seen in the last few weeks.
They've been calling it a sham show trial, a witch hunt, a kangaroo court, a shameful day in American history worthy of a banana republic. These are not the voices of some online trolls. These are the voices of senior elected Republicans who once claimed to be the party of law and order. And with this news that their supreme leader, Donald Trump, has become the first former U.S. president who is now a convicted felon, has really forced them to choose the wrong path. The correct path would have been to say, well, yes, the law is the law. The judiciary has to be trusted. These were 12 jurors, but of course they've politicized and weaponized the entire narrative. And experts are now warning that by sowing distrust in institutions and the rule of law, Trump supporters and his Republican allies were creating a political tinderbox ahead of the election in November and in the coming months, especially as Trump faces sentencing in June, that the sense of dread and fear of political unrest is likely to only increase dramatically. And in fact, historian Tim Naftali wrote on Twitter, "We've entered a new political and legal territory as a nation." He said Donald Trump will now force every GOP candidate to trash our judicial system. There will be a chorus of poison, likely worse than what we heard before January 6th. Should he win, he'd have a more toxic mandate than in 2017. Donald Trump didn't just get convicted by a hair. This was a unanimous decision. Guilty on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. He's due to be sentenced on the 11th of July, 4 days before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. He's not up against anybody else. Nobody else is seeking the nomination, it seems. And so it really is just Donald Trump, in the same way that Hitler did exactly the same thing. Also guilty of crimes, also elected, also supported, and then the darkness really started to present itself. This time around, the darkness is very much before us. This is a decision that we have to make as a nation, which path we are going to choose. And if you as an American didn't think that the US could lose its democracy and fall foul of a dictator this quickly in under a decade, then you haven't read your history books, respectfully. I mean, this keeps happening in history, and we're also seeing it in other parts of the US. I mean, it almost happened in Brazil with Jair Bolsonaro. He looked up to Donald Trump. Fortunately, as dictators will always fall eventually, and his tenure did not last long. But we're seeing it in Turkey with Erdogan. We're seeing it in Hungary, of course. We see it in North Korea. We see it in Russia. And we see it in China. And the US was always the place where people like me wanted to relocate to celebrate the freedom and democracy that was held proud. And now the US is once again on a precipice like these other nations. And my concern is that not Donald Trump winning the election. I personally don't feel that he has the support that he claims he has. But it's more about the institutions of America that have been devalued and degraded in the meantime. The way that Trump has been dissing the judiciary and judges and claiming that Joe Biden is the person behind these, which is how he would do it. But it's not how Joe Biden does it. And Biden personally criticized Donald Trump's attacks on the legal system, warning that it was reckless, dangerous, and irresponsible for people to say that the trial had been rigged just because they don't like the verdict. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Exactly the same thing happened on January 6th, 2021, when Donald Trump and his supporters did not like the outcome of the 2020 election. And so instead of just accepting it and succumbing to the peaceful transfer of power, they instead brought about a coup against their own country. And this is the issue now with Republicans, isn't it? If they don't like the results, they move the goalposts, they change the rules, they even change their views. Whereas they were the party of law and order, now law and order is irrelevant. And there can only be one set of rules and laws for a nation. You can't have a separate set of laws for the rich and the elite. Ultimately, we all have to be treated the same. And for some reason, their obsession with a former president being criminalized, and they're talking about it like it's a terrible thing. I mean, this happens all over the world. Italy with Silvio Berlusconi, for example, somebody who, faced multiple corruption charges, still managed to get himself elected. This is the problem, isn't it? That Donald Trump is not going to go quietly now. If anything, he's enraged, his supporters are enraged, and he will secure the Republican nomination, and he will seek to win. And he will seek to win even from prison. We don't know what the sentencing will be, whether he'll be on house arrest in Mar-a-Lago, where he's not allowed to touch a golf club, or whether he will be in some state penitentiary. Nobody really knows at this point, but the point that I'm making is that he will not go quietly. Dictators never do. In fact, when they are up against it, they make more noise than ever before. And, we've seen this in Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu, who himself is up for multiple corruption charges and instead is holding the country to ransom to save himself. And this is the playbook of people like Donald Trump. It keeps happening in history, and it's happening now here in the United States. And the moment that the rule of law is undermined by Republicans, especially lawmakers, senior people, I mean, even Mitch McConnell, leader of the Republicans in the Senate, has said that, this was an unfair trial. If you care for the details of the trial, and it's a shame that it wasn't televised, because then people could have seen with their own eyes and heard with their own ears how fair that trial was, and how Donald Trump had every opportunity to make his case, and he refused to give evidence. And then we saw this rambling speech from him yesterday, where he just talked for nearly half an hour, rambling, weird, going off in all directions, all of these campaign messages that he likes to weave in that we hear time and time again, and the language of the witch hunt, and it's just so unfair. Because it is not reality. It is Donald Trump's fantasy world.
A case where if they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. These are bad people. These are, in many cases, I believe, sick people.
Because he has support, and because he has these networks on his side, and because he has the support of newspapers and various far-right institutions linked to Christian nationalist organizations, and of course, big business, oil, for example, they will support him in getting this message out, that it was a sham trial and that the judge was in some way corrupted. None of that is true, and yet it does not stop them from saying it. And that is what is truly dangerous about this whole process. It's not dangerous to prosecute a former president if they've broken the law. But it's dangerous if that former president does not accept the charges and take the crime and do the time. I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.